Mental health and the King's Speech. The absence of mental health discussion in the King's Speech, especially considering the post-pandemic fallout and the cost of living crisis, is a significant omission. According to the Mental Health Foundation, as of 2023, nearly 20% of adults in the UK are experiencing some form of depression, a significant increase from 10% before the pandemic. Anxiety disorders have also surged, with the NHS reporting a 30% rise in the first year of the pandemic alone. The lack of emphasis on mental health in key governmental addresses, such as the King's Speech, raises questions about priorities and awareness at the highest levels. While the UK government has pledged £500 million for mental health services in response to the pandemic, experts argue that this is a drop in the ocean compared to the scale of the problem. There is a growing need for comprehensive policies that go beyond short-term fixes, focusing on long-term strategies to build resilient mental health systems and individual awareness. To effectively safeguard employee well-being in today's changing work environment, it is imperative that the HSE extends its mandate to enforce mental health provisions, thereby ensuring mental well-being is not merely recommended but required as a core aspect of workplace health regulations. The lack of discussion about mental health could suggest a gap in awareness or priority among those in power. The consequences of maintaining the status quo are significant. The NHS faces immense pressure, with mental health services stretched thin and waiting lists growing longer. This inertia in leadership and policy adaptation is costing lives and exacerbating the mental health crisis. The current mental health landscape, especially post-pandemic, requires leaders who are adaptable, tech-savvy, and open to unconventional solutions such as digital therapy platforms and community-based intervention programs. Furthermore, diversifying leadership in mental health can bring in voices and perspectives that have been historically underrepresented. This includes younger leaders, individuals from varied cultural backgrounds, and those with lived experiences of mental health challenges. Such diversity can ensure that policies and initiatives are more inclusive and attuned to the needs of a broader population. This inadequacy stems from a variety of systemic issues, ranging from the scope of their initiatives to the practicality of their enforcement. Firstly, HSE's traditional focus has been more aligned with physical health and safety, leaving mental health initiatives somewhat limited in scope and depth. While there is an acknowledgement of mental health issues, the strategies and solutions put forth often lack comprehensiveness. This gap is especially evident when considering the increased mental health challenges brought on by COVID-19 and the impact of the cost of living crisis, such as heightened workplace stress and anxiety. House's response to these new challenges, while well-intentioned, seems to lag behind the rapid evolution of these issues, lacking the agility and proactivity necessary for effective intervention. Furthermore, HSE's approach often appears to overemphasize policy development at the expense of practical, on-the-ground implementation. While policies are crucial, their real-world impact relies on active implementation, consistent monitoring, and strict enforcement. However, when it comes to mental health, HSE's guidelines often lack the enforceable bite that characterizes its physical safety regulations. This discrepancy leads to a patchwork of mental health management practices across different sectors and organizations, diluting the overall effectiveness of such policies. Having participated in numerous webinars featuring key HSE personnel, promoted through professional networking platforms such as LinkedIn, it has become evident that there is a prevailing sentiment within the organization that the current measures are sufficient. This perspective has led me to discontinue my attendance, as the discussions appear to offer little value in advancing the conversation. Both the HSE and government bodies seem to be challenged by a systemic issue. Positions of influence are occupied by individuals reluctant to initiate change or question established norms, which ultimately perpetuates the shortcomings of the organization. I like to call this as having all the wrong people, in all the right places. Resource allocation and prioritization are also critical areas where HSE seems to be lacking. Effective mental health initiatives in workplaces demand substantial resources, not just in terms of funding, but also in the form of dedicated personnel and training programs. The perceived under-allocation of resources towards mental health by HSE points to a prioritization issue, where mental well-being may not be regarded with the same urgency as physical safety. Critics argue that HSE's engagement in such collaborations has been insufficient, hindering the development of holistic and multifaceted mental health strategies. In essence, while HSE recognizes the significance of mental health in the workplace, its efforts are often seen as falling short in developing and implementing robust, enforceable, and impactful strategies. This gap between recognition and effective action underscores the need for a more dynamic, resourceful, and collaborative approach to address the burgeoning mental health challenges in UK workplaces, and that requires a change of personnel at the HSE. In the shadow of the pandemic and the current cost of living crisis, the United Kingdom stands at a crossroads. The omission of mental health from the King's Speech is not just an oversight. It is emblematic of a systemic failure to address a crisis that gnaws at the fabric of our society. The Health and Safety Executive, a bastion of workplace well-being, finds itself mired in antiquated approaches that no longer suffice in the new reality of our times. The need for a paradigm shift is not just pressing, it is overdue. This call to action goes beyond mere policy change. It is a demand for an ideological renaissance at the very helm of leadership. It beckons for a vanguard of visionaries, those unencumbered by the inertia that plagues the current establishment. The UK's mental health landscape is crying out for leaders who are not just aware but are also deeply empathetic, who not only listen but also act decisively and innovatively. We are at a pivotal moment where the cost of inaction is measured in human lives. The chronic underfunding, the piecemeal strategies, and the lack of enforceable mental health regulations are not just policy shortcomings. They reflect a leadership that has become ossified. The challenge before us is not just to replace individuals but to cultivate a new breed of leaders, diverse, dynamic, and daring, who can redefine the contours of mental health advocacy and intervention. Let us not be afraid to discard the archaic frameworks that have led us astray. Let us embrace the maelstrom of change and emerge not just unscathed but revitalized, with a mental health system that is as resilient as it is compassionate. Thanks for watching. Like, share and subscribe. Check out Mental Health and Life for all your training needs.